Hi everyone, I'm down in London this morning. We've come down to join the march in solidarity for Palestine in their current occupation by the Israelis. It's starting at the embankment and going all the way through to Hyde Park over a period of hours, stopping at many of the tourist attractions along the way.
Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free! Occupation no more! Israel is a terrorist state! Israel is a terrorist state! Occupation no more! Israel is a terrorist state! Palestine! 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 Occupation no more! 5, 6, 7, 8! Israel is a terrorist state! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! Occupation no more! Israel is a terrorist state! Palestine will be free!
Last year that Israel operates an apartheid system in the occupied territories, and that must be brought to an end. Brothers and sisters, we have a message for the British government. It is stop arms sales to Israel. Sanctions until Israel come to the international law and recognise the Palestinian state.
Thank you very much for the tremendous crowd that is here this afternoon. And what I want to say first of all is we are here to say to the Palestinians, sisters and brothers, we stand with you. We will stand with you.
Free, free!
Palestine!
Thousands, millions!
We are all Palestinians!
Thousands, millions!
We are all Palestinians!
Millions, millions!
We are all Palestinians!
Thousands, millions!
We are all Palestinians!
Free, free!
Palestine!
Free, free!
Palestine!
John McDonnell, MP! I'm here in absolute solidarity with the Palestinian people. I salute their courage in standing up yet again against this oppressor. I also send my condolences to all those families who've lost loved ones in Gaza. All those parents who've lost their children. Let's make this absolutely clear. This was a war crime. This conflict was initiated by Netanyahu in order to preserve his power, but also to keep him out of prison. So let us all pledge that one day Netanyahu will be in prison. will not be for corruption. It will be for the war crimes perpetrated on the Palestinian people. I say this, yes, a ceasefire has been negotiated and we welcome a ceasefire. But let's be clear, there will be no ceasefire in our campaign to boycott, disinvest and sanction The message is clear. The message is clear. We will not cease our campaign in solidarity until there is justice. So yes, let's make it clear. No justice, no peace, solidarity.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Brothers, sisters, comrades, friends, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I have three messages. The first, the Palestinians have perfectly illustrated the concept of show, don't tell. The Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah showed us and showed the entire world the ugly face, but the real face of occupation. The people of Al-Aqsa and Jerusalem showed us and the entire world the meaning of dignity and of honor. The people of Gaza showed us and showed the entire world the true meaning of resilience, courage, and sacrifice. The second message is that whilst today we feel jubilant, we feel uplifted by what the Palestinians did and what they showed the world, this is not the time to stop. Let's not be under any illusion. The occupation still stands. Gaza is still under siege. And the Israeli state is continuing with its inhumane, brutal war crimes every single day. My dear brothers and sisters, we cannot rest. And we mustn't rest because the Palestinians cannot rest. We mustn't let up because the Palestinians will not and cannot let up. And we cannot stop because the Palestinians cannot stop. And the third and final message to Boris Johnson and his government, and to virtually every single party that sits in Parliament. We must, here in London, we must own up to our historical responsibility in finding this crisis, in the calamities that has befallen the Palestinian people and the entire Middle Eastern region as a result of what happened here more than 100 years ago. We must stop our assistance and succor to the apartheid state of Israel. And last but not least, we saw what happened in Palestine. We saw who stood up for the brutality and crimes of the Israelis. It is churlish and immature of the British government to disengage and not talk to the real people on the ground who are leading the Palestinian people. Every single Palestinian faction, including the resistance, represents Palestine and the Palestinian struggle, and they must re-enter into the political fold. Otherwise, we here in Britain, the British government and the entire world will be deemed absolutely irrelevant. Free, free! Palestine! Free, free! Palestine! Free, free! Palestine! Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Today we mourn the loss of all those lives lost, brutally killed in these attacks on the Palestinian people. And we also celebrate the resistance of the Palestinian people, their courage and their determination to end Israeli apartheid, to end the occupation and to free Palestine. The military machine of the Israeli state has been stopped, and make no mistake about it, this is a victory for Palestine. Now, these attacks and incursions and ethnic cleansing must stop forever. Let us pay tribute, in particular, to the young people who have given leadership to the struggle in East Jerusalem. And to all the Palestinian communities, wherever they are living, who have refused to be divided and marginalised and defeated by the Israeli state. This is a resurgence of the Palestinian struggle in Palestine, inside Israel and across the world. The people have stood up to a nuclear-armed state, to one of the most powerful militaries in the world. We will stand alongside you and fight alongside you until freedom is achieved. Long live Palestine! Long live Gaza! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! 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 Free, free Palestine!
Netanyahu has scored a massive own goal. He was trying to save his skin. He was trying to manipulate the Israeli elections. But what he didn't count on was the resistance, the resilience, the courage, the bravery, the humanity, the dignity of Palestinians and their allies. Not since 1936 have we seen the divided and dispossessed Palestinians rise up with the unity they have shown in the last few weeks. This is not a new violence. The Palestinians have faced dispossession since 1917, and it began right here in London. And right now, we in London are saying we are not going to be silenced. We are with the Palestinian people. The Intifada, the uprising, is not just in Gaza, in the West Bank, in occupied territories. It is happening here in London, in Birmingham, in Brighton, in Washington, in Australia, and around the world. I'm here to say, yes, the Palestinians are victims. I don't need to tell anybody here about the dismemberment of the children, the killing, the torture, the murder, innocent lives wrecked, ruined. But what I want to say, the silver lining in the horrors that we see now, that we can't pretend are not happening with the social media that we have. The Palestinians have revived us. We too have been silenced in the heart of the so-called.
Thank you for your great and influential contribution in this important battle against the occupation. Congratulations to you all for the defeat of the occupation forces. from Gaza without achieving any of its goals, except for the destruction and killing of civilians and the demolition of homes and residential buildings, factories, health centers, and even streets. I thank you all for your contribution in keeping the morale of our people in Palestine high as they continue their occupation. As a Palestinian, dear brothers, sisters, comrades, and as one of the organizers of this great demonstration, I sincerely thank you for your support. Your efforts are highly appreciated by our people in Palestine. On behalf of all of you, I would like to thank Gaza and the legitimate lawful resistance movement in all the occupied Palestinian land, which believe to be the sole and legitimate representative of the Palestinians wherever they are. Gaza, Gaza, Gaza! Long live Gaza! Gaza, Gaza, Gaza! Long live Gaza! Comrades, after the scenes that we have seen over the course of the 11 days of Israeli terrorism, killing and destruction, which were met by resilience, resistance, and the great and unique sacrifice by our people in Gaza and all Palestine. It is time for the world to respect the choice of the Palestinian people and to seize the negative sentiment toward the Palestinian resistance factions that are striving for freedom, justice, and lasting peace in the region. It is also high time for the world to recognize the root of the problem in Palestine and to take real and practical steps to end the occupation. We as Palestinians abroad, along with all the free people of the world and all of the solidarity organizers and organizations, will continue our movement and will double our efforts to mobilize the popular masses in support of justice and freedom. We will seek to put more pressure on the occupation state and the countries that support it until true justice and freedom is achieved for Palestinian people. Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Thank you, Gaza! Gaza, Gaza, Gaza! Long live Gaza! Gaza, Gaza, Gaza! Long live Gaza! Gaza, Gaza, Gaza! Long live Gaza!
Gaza, Gaza, Gaza! Never wavered in his support for the Palestinian people. Brothers, sisters, comrades, friends, please give an warm welcome to writer, broadcaster, activist, and legend, Tariq Ali.
Friends, it's extremely important to understand that the latest events in Jerusalem, the ethnic cleansing that has taken place in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, is nothing new. It's extremely important to understand that the bombing of Gaza and the ceasefire is nothing new. These things have happened 3 or 4 times before. And the first intifada, the second intifada, the general strike of last week, what looks like a new intifada, we have to pay tribute to the grassroots Palestinians, the people young and old who poured out onto the streets of Jerusalem and Gaza, who said enough, no more, and pushed their leadership forward. That is what we depend on. People of your generation, a young generation now marching yet again to free Palestine. So it's important to understand that what we are seeing in Palestine, the occupied areas and historic Palestine, is yet another attempt by the Zionist governments of Israel, whether it's Netanyahu or whether it's some other Yahoo, they've been doing this since 1948. It has been a continuous Nakba, decade after decade, an attempt to drive the Palestinian people out of their territory, to get more settlers in from Brooklyn, settlers who are semi-fascists, who shout slogans denouncing the Arab race, who have learned nothing from what happened to them in Europe. Nothing. And if they talk a lot about saying all those marching for Palestine are anti-Semites. This, of course, isn't true. But I'll tell you something, and they don't like hearing it. Every time they bomb Gaza, every time they attack Jerusalem, that is what creates anti-Semitism. Stop the occupation, stop the bombings, and the casual anti-Semitism will soon disappear. The last thing I want to say to you is the global solidarity we have seen has been amazing. So, thank you to the dockers in Italy, in Livorno and Naples. Thank you to the dockers in Livorno and Naples who refuse to load weapons on Israeli ships. Thank you to the representative of the Bolivian government in the United Nations Security Council who read out a list of the Palestinian dead and said to the Security Council, for 70 years you have watched and done nothing to help the Palestinians. And we will march as long as necessary till the Palestinian people are free.
Labour's front bench team as Shadow Minister for Employment Rights. Make some noise for Imran Hussein MP! Friends, we stand united today against persecution, oppression, and injustice. And we must always speak out when people are being persecuted and oppressed. And we must always call injustice injustice. We welcome the ceasefire, but let us be clear. This will not stop the persecution, oppression, and injustice the Palestinians face on a daily basis. The oppression did not start just 2 weeks ago with attacks on worshippers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, or even in the enforced evictions at Sheikh Jarrah. The persecution, oppression, and injustice that Palestinians face has been going on unopposed for decades at the hands of an Israeli government that places Palestinian children in military detention and puts Palestinians on unfair trials in military courts, continues to impose a long, brutal siege of Gaza, carries out indiscriminate attacks against Palestinians, and continues, particularly under this right-wing Netanyahu government, to accelerate the illegal annexation of Palestine through the building of illegal settlements and forced evictions of Palestinians. And friends, let us be clear. These acts that are taking place are grave injustices against humanity and are in direct contravention of international law. Yet the silence of the international community is deafening. So we must ask ourselves, what faith can we, the Palestinians, or the world have in the international community when they continue to be silent in the face of decades of such brutality, such persecution, such oppression, and such injustice? So we stay here today. Shame on the international community. Friends, as I said in Parliament just last week, the international community must wake up. They must fulfill their obligation and they must recognize their responsibilities under international law. They must end the brutal siege of Gaza. They must end the illegal occupation of Palestine. And they must provide full support for the International Criminal Court's investigation and prosecution of war crimes. And we unite today to send a clear message to the international community to demand the immediate recognition of the state of Palestine. Solidarity.
Immense honour to introduce Kevin Courtney, Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union and stalwart supporter of Palestine.
And I am so pleased to be here with all of you today. I've been here marching with trade unionists in solidarity with Palestine, just as I was pleased to be on the demonstration last week. Last week I said, none of us is an island, none of us are free unless all of us are free. And I tell you, the movement saying that is growing stronger and stronger all the time. Our country had the biggest anti-apartheid movement in the world outside South Africa, and you can see the growth of such a broad Palestine solidarity campaign here today. Trade unionists who are here in solidarity with the general strike in Palestine this week. We are here calling out for justice. We are here calling out against the evictions in Sheikh Jarrah, the incursions into Alaska. We are calling on our government to act, even to act on its own policies, as Baroness Varsi said this week. We are here for justice. We are here for Palestine. We are here from many backgrounds, and we are united in our diversity against all discrimination, against all racism and sexism, against all forms of Islamophobia, against all forms of anti-Semitism. And the banner I marched with today, had the TUC logo, and it had the logos of 15 major unions in this country. And I want you to cheer for those unions. The four biggest unions, Unison, Unite, GMB and my own NEU. The three railway unions, ASAF, RMT and TSSA. The biggest civil service union, the PCS. The post office union, the CWU. The university union, the UCU. The fire brigades union who took action for Palestine. The prison officers union. The actors union Equity. The bakers union and the United Road Transport Union. We are all here. We are mourning for the hundreds who died in Gaza, the West Bank and Israel, and we are so pleased that the bombs and the guns have fallen silent. But in that silence of arms, we must cry out all the louder for justice. It is only justice that can secure peace. It is justice that the the international community must press for. It's justice that the UK government must press for. And justice means an end to the evictions in Sheikh Jarrah, an end to the incursions, an end to the occupation, an end to the illegal settlements. And we have to spread that voice louder and louder in our universities, in our churches, our synagogues and mosques, in our communities. Join the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. Build a movement for justice. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine.
We're not going to let this rain stop us, are we? We're not going to let the bad weather rain on our parade because we're here for Palestine. Our next speaker is from one of the organisations that called today's demonstration, the Muslim Association of Britain. Please welcome Mustafa Dimmack. Here he is!
Brothers, sisters, friends, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. The cameras have now left Gaza. The eyes of the world have once again turned away. Let's count what they're leaving behind. 232 dead, 65 of them children, families left homeless, children orphaned, parents childless, media left without offices or equipment, schools destroyed, sewage on the streets, the only COVID testing centre bombed, the biggest bookshop bombed, charities bombed, businesses bombed, homes reduced to rubble. Let's not forget the nearly 2,000 Palestinians left wounded. They will need to adjust to their new lives. Many now without limbs, loved ones or homes. Entire families have been killed, from the youngest to the eldest without warning. The 73rd year of the oppression of the Palestinians remains as cruel as those before it. Gaza is still under siege for the 15th year in a row. All of historic Palestine remains occupied. The refugees have not been allowed to return. Sheikh Jarrah, Jerusalem and the West Bank are still being ethnically cleansed. Al-Aqsa Mosque remains at the mercy of the Israeli forces. So please, tell me, what ceasefire are we talking about? Israel is guilty of the great crime of apartheid. It is the consensus of human rights groups around the world. Now, there are people who say things will never change, that there is no hope, that Israel has too many friends, too many allies, and too many defenders. Yet remember this. Once upon a time, this country had people who sang about hanging Nelson Mandela. Once upon a time, our Prime Minister called him a terrorist. Once upon a time, many people called themselves a friend of apartheid South Africa. Today, apartheid in South Africa no longer exists, and Mandela has a statue in Parliament Square. We at the Muslim Association of Britain demand the end of apartheid. We demand that the Palestinians have the right to exist, have the right to resist, and have the right to return to their homes. Brothers and sisters, the tide is turning, the narrative is changing, history is on our side. So as we leave here today, let's make a pledge that we will boycott and divest from Israel until the end of apartheid. A pledge that we will not rest our imagination, nor our activism, nor our commitment, until sanctions have been imposed and all of Palestine is free. Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Next up is Richard Bergen MP for Leeds East, former Shadow Justice Secretary, here in full solidarity of the Palestinian cause. Make some noise!
Palestine has the right to exist. Palestine has the right to exist. Palestine has the right to exist, and Palestine will exist. Martin Luther King said that peace must be more than an absence of conflict. Peace must be the presence of justice. We welcome the ceasefire announcements on Thursday night, but that alone will not mean justice. Not if the collective punishment of the people of Gaza continues as it has done for 14 years. Not if the continued brutality of the Israeli occupation that's lasted more than 50 years continues. Not if Palestinians have to see their homes demolished and stolen by Israeli settlers day in, day out. Not if Palestinian children continue to be tried in military courts in a language that most of them don't understand. Not if Israelis and Palestinians face this situation. The reality is we need to see an end to the situation that we've seen for so long. And to achieve a long-lasting peace, to achieve the long-lasting peace that we all want for all Palestinians and all Israeli people, we need to end the underlying injustices. That means demanding that Israel ends the blockade of Gaza. That means demanding that Israel ends its illegal occupation of Palestine. That means demanding that the Palestinian people stop being treated like second-class citizens in Israel itself. Because even when the bombs aren't dropping, the inhumanity, the suffering, the bloodshed, the loss continues day in, day out. That's the reality the Palestinian people face. So we must continue to speak out. We must continue to demand justice. We must continue to demand all of these things. And that means that we, here in Britain, make demands of the British government. How can the British government say they're arguing for peace when they're arming the Israeli state? So we must demand that the British government stops all arms sales to Israel. We must demand that the British government imposes sanctions on Israel for its repeated violations of international law. We must demand that the British government recognises Palestine. Our Parliament voted to recognise the state of Palestine in 2014, and it needs to happen now. Palestine has the right to exist. Palestine has the right to exist, and Palestine will exist. So let's step up the push for peace. Let's step up the push for justice, and let's step up the peace. Let's step up the push for a free Palestine. Palestine will exist because Palestine has the right to exist. Thank you very much.
Hi everybody, I'm absolutely gutted because we've come out of the main crowd. I've got footage of all the speakers at Hyde Park for this, but you can probably hear in the background, Stella, Julian Assange's partner, is actually talking on stage right now. I was right there and we came away before all the speakers had finished.
I am on the stage today because my partner, Julian Assange, Assange should be here with you. But he cannot be here because he is 11 miles from where we are standing now in a 9 square meter metal box. A political prisoner in Belmarsh prison, imprisoned for WikiLeaks publications. I wish he could see this crowd of people like him who give a damn. People whose sense of empathy and solidarity prevents them from remaining silent. Julian is in prison right now because the United States wants to extradite him over publications that expose war crimes in Iraq, torture in Guantanamo Bay, and the Israeli government's policies in Palestine. He is charged with publishing evidence of the Israeli military's policy of using disproportionate force against civilian areas. The Israeli government's strategy of keeping Gaza on the brink of economic collapse and humanitarian disaster. The concrete ways by which the United States undermines UN investigations and threatens officials of the International Criminal Court to shield the Israeli government from scrutiny. Julian faces 175 years long sentence because of these publications. He is named with his freedom and making his life. Julian published the words spoken by the Israeli government's officials behind closed doors. Words that the Israeli military materializes in the form of airstrikes that kill innocent men, women, and children. The victims know because they live and die through it. But the rest of the world relies on what it's told. Keeping knowledge subjugated is what governments do to control public perception. Public perception shapes our understanding of what is true and what is possible. That is why the IDF bombed the building where Al Jazeera and AP were housed, and that is why the US is imprisoning Julian Assange in a UK jail. To hamper our understanding and to prevent us from acting on that knowledge. To defend our right to know is to defend our right to shape our own destiny, our right to expose policies that kill innocents, our right to force accountability. Like Julian says,
thousands of feet up. The occupation is the issue. The occupation of the West Bank, the siege of Gaza, they are the issues. And so whilst the ceasefire is obviously a step forward, unless the fundamental issues are addressed, we will be here again. But I simply say this to those naysayers around the world. We, many of us in this field today, in this park today, have been on many demonstrations in support of the Palestinian people over many years. And we will be here as long as it takes until the Palestinian people are free. We will never give up on